The Cincinnati Bengals lied to Trey Hendrickson, overpaid the wrong people, and now they expect their locker room to just live with it. The Washington Commanders had better be paying attention. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Commanders, where we watch the film, break down the data, and call it like we see it. I am your host, David Harrison. This is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Not only am I here with you 5 days a week, not last week, but picking up this week again, 5 days a week, but I also cover the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com and WUSA9.com. I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or view today. And whether you're an everydayer or just coming through, I appreciate you all the same. But to the everydayers, a special thank you for making this show a part of your daily routine. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode. If it's your first time through, thank you for finding us. Hopefully you like what you hear and you come back again soon. Coming up on today's episode, what Sam Cosmi's return timeline could mean for the Commanders' offensive line, why Jayden Daniels' rookie year might have just scratched the surface on what is to come. But first, the Bengals are showing Washington exactly how not to handle contract negotiations. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. If the Commanders want to keep their locker room from turning on them down the line, then they need to learn from the Cincinnati Bengals' failure to pay their stars the right way. That's how we're going to open up the week, a mailbag episode here on Locked On Commanders. Dr. Wonderful Insider came through and said, can the negotiations or non-negotiations between the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson and Shamar Stewart teach us anything about how to handle player deals and contract talks before things get ugly? And yeah, I think it can teach at least three things for those that are paying attention. And hopefully the Commanders already know these three things and don't necessarily need the Bengals to teach them these lessons. But just in case, the Bengals' first mistake from where I sit, not negotiating fairly and certainly not negotiating in good faith. Defensive end Trey Hendrickson told ESPN that in 2024, last year, he was told by the Bengals that if he continued to produce at a high rate, they would come to the table in 2025. Well, Hendrickson did that. The Bengals, according to Hendrickson, have not. And he has since said, quote, offers prior to the draft did not reflect the vision we shared and were promised last offseason, end quote. Pro Football Talk said that they heard the Bengals are offering, quote unquote, roughly $28 million per year. ESPN's Adam Schefter went on Pat McAfee's show saying that he believes the Bengals want Hendrickson to sign a one-year deal. If those two figures line up, given that he's already scheduled to make $16 million this year, the Bengals want to give him an $8 million pay bump for 2025 and then call it done, or at least have the right to call it done. Trey Hendrickson, meanwhile, wants security. According to Spot Track, $28 million would be the eighth highest annual average value for a current edge deal. And 1 year certainly is nowhere near security for an NFL player. So I assume Trey Hendrickson wants at least 3 years and is going to want something at least in the ballpark of $35 million per year, which would still have him below Max Crosby in the Las Vegas Raiders and Danielle Hunter of the Houston Texans, not to mention Myles Garrett of the Cleveland Browns. So good money, but still not top dollar necessarily. What really doesn't help Cincinnati is the fact that the market doesn't even support them if, again, their offer that's reported is true. The Houston Texans, speaking of Danielle Hunter, the Houston Texans gave Danielle Hunter, who turns 31 years old this October and had 12 sacks in 2024, a 2-year deal that averages $35.6 million per year. Hendrickson turns 31 later this year than Danielle Hunter does and had 17 and a half sacks last year without Will Anderson Jr. playing on the opposite side of him. So pretty different circumstances for Trey Hendrickson. The moral of the story for this one, negotiate in good faith. Don't lie to your players. Don't BS them. We hear Dan Quinn talk all the time about how these players have been BS their whole life. So he makes it a point to not BS them and be one of those people. Cincinnati Bengals, clearly, if everything that Trey Hendrickson is saying is true, not learning that lesson. Bengals' second mistake, overpaying someone else. In no world, and this I don't mean this is disrespect to T. Higgins, but in no world is T. Higgins the 9th best wide receiver in the National Football League. In 2024, in fact, T. Higgins was 24th in targets, 24th in catches, 26th in yards, 7th in touchdowns, so that's pretty good, second in success percentage among receivers with like or better receptions. So that's really good. Now, those average to 16th. So even with those two, 7th in TDs, second in success percentage, he comes out at 16th. That's $22 million annual average value, 23 if you want to add some inflation to keep him in there a little bit longer. That's $5.75 million less than what the Cincinnati Bengals gave him in his new contract. So you're overpaying T. Higgins by close to $6 million, and you're trying to lowball Trey Hendrickson by about $7 million. I think I found the accounting issue with the Cincinnati Bengals. Meanwhile, Trey Hendrickson, first in sacks, 18th in tackles, second in tackles for loss, first in quarterback hits. Now that does average out to about 5th place, right? That's about 5th average ranking there, which comes into about $28.25 million, which is about what the Bengals are reportedly offering Trey Hendrickson. So if you wanted to try you're great at sacks, but your tackling isn't all that great, so we're going to balance that out and give you 28.25, you can't, because you overpaid the crap out of T. Higgins. And everybody knows that you overpaid him because Joe Burrow wants you to. Literally, you're asking the older brother, Trey Hendrickson, about to be 31, to eat less ice cream for dessert because Joey wants more. Moral of the story, be consistent. Treat players fairly based on production, based on the value of the team. Wide receiver 2, never going to be more valuable than the league's sack leader. Yet the Cincinnati Bengals clearly prioritized getting wide receiver 2 an overpaid contract over that sack leader. Washington Commanders, they paid Sam Cosmi top 5 guard money in 2024. Felt like that was pretty good value for his importance to the team and his playability. Looking at the list of guards in the NFL, I can't find more than 4 who are better than him when healthy. Even today, Sam Cosmi's AAV, annual average value, is 7th. If McLaurin, that's a contract obviously we're all wondering about, right? If Terry McLaurin gets the same, he's looking at about $32 million annual average minimum. As much as 35 if he doesn't want to slip out of the top 5 until at least 2027. So I think that's kind of the market. If you're the Washington Commanders, again, negotiating good faith, negotiating with honesty and market value, that's probably where you're looking. Bengals' third mistake, making their problem somebody else's. When I think about this situation, right, I think about driving. I drive a lot. So I think about it, and we've all seen this, the guy who's about to miss his exit on the off-ramp, on the highway, or take the wrong one, is in the exit lane and suddenly realizes, oh no, I'm going to miss my exit, or oh no, this isn't my exit, and just swerves maniacally, nearly hitting or causing other accidents all around him because I made a mistake or I'm about to make a mistake. Now, I've driven in countries where if you miss your exit, there's not another exit for a long, long time. In America, we don't have that problem. Usually you miss your exit, there's like another one, maybe a couple miles up the road, you take it, you turn around, you come back, you get on your right exit. I know it's annoying, but you made the mistake. Not everybody else. Don't make everybody else a mistake. Anyway, the Bengals are doing that in the football form, right? They overpaid T. Higgins. They also overpaid Jamar Chase. Now look, Jamar Chase, best receiver in the NFL, got it. But is he $5.25 million a year better than Justin Jefferson? No. Cincinnati wanted to make a splash, so they spent Bentley money on a Rolls Royce. Rolls Royce is still great. I'm not dogging Jamar Chase, but the Bengals overpaid. They did it for the clicks. They did it for the attention, and now they're paying for it. They want Trey Hendrickson to pay for it. If that's not bad enough, they also want rookie defensive end, edge, outside linebacker, whatever you want to call him, Shamar Stewart to pay for it. Asking Shamar Stewart to take an unprecedented rookie deal that allows the Bengals to cut him and his money is just ridiculous. It's nothing but an executive, Duke Tobin in this case, trying to pass his bad decisions down to Trey Hendrickson, down to Shamar Stewart. So the moral of the story, don't do things for clicks. Don't do things for the wrong reasons. The Commanders couldn't care less what the rest of us think. Some people think they overpaid Javon Kinlaw. Whatever. Drafted an offensive tackle who might not even start right away in the first round. Traded for a busted Deebo Samuel. Washington does not care what any of us have to say. And it's beautiful. It's exactly what it should be because it hasn't always been like that around here. And they're making decisions for the right reasons, which don't always guarantee the right results, right? But it's the best way to go about it. And it's the opposite of what the Cincinnati Bengals did with this ridiculous 2-receiver deal where they overpaid both of them, but the most egregious overpay was T. Higgins. And if you take the money they overpaid T, and you take the money they overpaid Jamar Chase, that's the difference between what you're offering Trey Hendrickson and what you need to offer Trey Hendrickson to get him on the field. And if you don't have those accounting issues, you're not asking a rookie who's just trying to get in the NFL, just trying to get his first contract secure, let alone his second one, to eat a bunch of money that you're responsible for. A lot of lessons that the Washington Commanders can learn from Cincinnati Bengals. I'm hoping, and I kind of believe, Adam Peters doesn't need to learn those lessons from Duke Tobin because he already knows more than Duke Tobin. Jayden Daniels doesn't need to avoid a sophomore slump, by the way, talking about narratives. He just needs to keep doing what he already proved he can, and that might be more than enough. That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Summer sports are in full swing, literally. And whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. While all those NFL contract storylines, Hendrickson wanting more, Higgins getting too much, McLaurin waiting for Washington to step up, it's like watching live odds shift in real time. And when you add in Jayden Daniels' ceiling conversation, I'd be hammering the over on his breakout potential. FanDuel makes it easy to bet, quick to cash out, or just flat out fun, even when it's not football season. So if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Jayden Daniels isn't chasing Houston Texans quarterback CJ Stroud. He's already more consistent, more reliable, and more dangerous. Several insiders have wanted to have this conversation. Some a little bit more pointed, some a little bit more general, but everybody wants to talk about Jayden Daniels' sophomore slump potential. But what if year one was his floor? All right, some people want to talk about the national narrative that there's a sophomore slump coming and why it could be different. Some are just asking in general, could it be coming? And some are considering, could it be even better in year two than it was in year one? I think personally, my gut, what I've seen, what I've heard, tells me that's more likely you're going to get a better Jayden Daniels in year two than you are in year one. In year one, I drafted him in the 10th round to be my starting fantasy football quarterback and has him as part of my roster. Took that all the way deep into the playoffs. Now, I also took Christian McCaffrey with my first pick, so that hurt me pretty significantly. But Jayden did his part. This year, I'm going to have to jump a little bit higher if I want to get Jayden Daniels on my fantasy roster. We'll see what my strategy is when the time comes. Anyway, 773 NFL quarterbacks have recorded stats in their rookie season in the Super Bowl era. That's since the creation of the Super Bowl, 773 rookie quarterbacks have recorded stats. Of them, Jayden Daniels ranks 11th in completions, 3rd in completion percentage, 15th in passing yards, 11th in passing TDs, 8th in passer rating, 16th in success rate, 2nd in fourth quarter comebacks, 6th in game-winning drives, and had the 3rd fewest interceptions among rookie quarterbacks with like or more pass attempts. That's a great rookie season. Arguably, one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen in professional sports, in any professional sport, which is what made him such an easy NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year award winner. And if it wasn't for someone who's clearly a Raiders fan, he would have been the undoubted, unanimous NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year Anyway, a lot of the slump talk is comparing Jayden Daniels to CJ Stroud of the Houston Texans. They're good friends. They're both young. They're both number 2 overall picks. They both transferred from one power conference school to another power conference school. A lot of similarities between the two young men. The 2023 NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, CJ Stroud, turned a team that picked number 2 overall into a division winner and a playoff team. Jayden Daniels, number 2 overall pick, turned his team into a playoff team, not a division winner, but certainly a division contender, albeit in a better NFC East division than the AFC South. But look, when we talk about CJ Stroud's slump and whether or not Jayden Daniels is at risk of doing the same thing this year, I think it's important to first of all look at CJ Stroud's slump. In his second season, just his second year as an NFL quarterback, the hardest position to play in the National Football League, in the worst division in football, on one of the worst teams before he got there in football, CJ Stroud finished the year 12th in completions, 18th in completion percentage, 15th in passing yards, 17th in passing touchdowns, 16th in fewest interceptions, 21st in passer rating. Middle of the pack in most of that, 21st passer rating, a little bit lower than middle of the pack, but middle of the pack in pretty much everything. So tells you about half the NFL would absolutely love to have that type of quarterback year that CJ Stroud just had in a down season. Houston Texans won double-digit games again, 10 wins. They won the division again. They won a playoff game again. When that's your bad year, It's a pretty good bad year, right? But it wasn't just CJ Stroud that quote unquote slumped, right? The Houston Texans in general had real issues in 2024. More pressures allowed, no run game, wide receiver injuries, no true identity. All of that made life harder around CJ Stroud. It would make life harder on any quarterback, and any quarterback would quote unquote slump with those circumstances happening around him. They have a lack of identity. The Texans are good. They're not imposing. There's no fear of the Houston Texans marching into your city, taking over your home. It just doesn't exist. And then, of course, the biggest hindrance of all to the Houston Texans last year and CJ Stroud, expectation. Fans and media alike labeled the Houston Texans a Super Bowl or bust team in 2024. And while I don't cover the Texans, I watched enough of them to know they're not in the same tier. They weren't last year in the same tier. They should have been considered coming out of 2023 to be in the same tier as the Chiefs, Bills, or the Ravens. CJ Stroud's rookie season, while strong, right? Don't want to take away from him too much, was also inflated. In week 8 against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Stroud threw for 470 yards and 5 touchdowns. Without that inflated games, Stroud's numbers, a little bit more pedestrian. Something we don't remember the next offseason when we're talking about potential MVP candidates and all that stuff. So where do the Washington Commanders differ? How can I sit here and tell you that I don't think Jayden Daniels is going to suffer the same slump that CJ Stroud did, which again, I'm telling you is not about CJ as much as it just is about the entire team. Well, for one, Commanders offensive line, wide receivers, they're still a work in progress. That's very similar to Houston's situation last year. The run game should be stronger with Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson healthy. Remember, first half of the season before the injury set in, very good run game. The Houston Texans, the reason their run game didn't work was not injury, just didn't work. Joe Mixon had a pretty decent year, though. The difference is here, Washington has a clear identity, fight to the whistle, every whistle, and Jayden is more consistent. He's not consistent. He's not inflated by one stat padding game, right? There's not one game where you can look at. There is a 5 touchdown game, but he also had 2 interceptions in that game, right? So it goes both ways. But outside of that, there's not an inflated game that overall just pumps up his general stats. He's pretty consistent across the board. So could Jayden Daniels slump if the same things happen? Yeah, of course he could. But so could Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, anybody, right? Imagine Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles without A.J. Brown, without Devonta Smith, and with a mediocre Saquon Barkley. It's not going to go well, right? So that's everybody. I wouldn't worry about it, is what I'm saying. I wouldn't worry about the slump talk, okay? I wouldn't let it bother you because so much of it is unknown. There's a lot about this game that happens every single season that you just can't control, and that goes beyond the scheme, goes beyond the stats. But just when you look at like how would things impact Jayden versus how they impacted CJ, I would say CJ Stroud is talented, but he's not really dynamic, while Jayden, I think, proved to be very dynamic in his rookie season. I think CJ Stroud is more of a Dak Prescott than he is a Lamar Jackson or a Patrick Mahomes. I think Jayden is more Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes than he is Dak Prescott. And that's very dangerous to make those comparisons because, you know, we just can get in trouble doing that. But I think from a play style and a team impact potential, I think that's pretty much where he sits. But here's the thing. This isn't just about Jayden not slumping, right? It's about how well the Commanders have set him up to keep growing and how well that setup holds up during the NFL season because, you know, again, you lose some of these players the Houston Texans lost last year in their spots on the depth chart. And again, I just think any quarterback is going to struggle in that situation. Of course, none of it matters if the offensive line starts up there, can't protect Jayden. And with Sam Cosmi's return, potentially coming early, potentially coming later, things can change up front very, very quickly, depending on how the season is going. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Sam Cosmi might be the Washington Commanders' best offensive lineman when healthy, and whether he plays this season could depend on wins, not just wellness. Tia came through the mailbag and said, how far off is Sam Cosmi from returning? Truth be told, I don't know. Can't tell you that. Dan Quinn isn't telling us that, so I can't tell you that. What I can tell you is ACLs typically take 9 to 12 months to recover from. Sam hurt his in January, so you're looking at September, right? 9 months from January would be October. So you're looking at October as the early part of that window. January is the late part of that window. For me, no matter when Sam can come back, I think the status of the team has to play a big part into whether or not he actually comes back in 2025. So exploring his role and how he stabilized the offensive line, especially at right guard position. He's obviously a very big stabilizer, right? But if he can return in late October, then it's probably a go. Like that's early enough in the season that you're probably just going to say, okay, let's put him in. Nick Allegretti, you're either going to be a backup now or you're going to replace Brandon Coleman on the left side, depending on how Brandon Coleman is doing. If Cosby needs more time, then for me, the decision has to come down to what is happening in the season. I think the window is from 4 to 7, right? So if the team is 400 to 700, then I think you put Cosby back in. If the team is below 400 or above 700, I don't think re-injuring him is worth putting him back in, or the team is doing so well that it's hard to justify putting him back in at this point, right? The only limitation is the team doing too well for the team, though, I believe. I don't believe the team can be doing so bad that you don't put him in. For example, let's say Sam Cosmi is ready to return at Thanksgiving, right? The team has played 11 games by then. For me, if the team is 4-7 at that point, it's not worth risking Sam Cosmi's future to put him in. But I think the team will still put him in because at that point you're 4-7. You could still go 10-8. You could still go 11-7, right? Or no, 10-7 or 9-8, right? If depending on how things go. So I think the team probably brings him back. But I think for me, I would say it's not worth it, right? If the team is 8-3, however, after 11 games, and Sam is ready to come back, then I kind of look at it as like maybe you're doing so well that it doesn't make sense to bring Sam in because, again, that offensive line is a 5-man unit working as one. It's a dance. It's choreographed. Like there's a lot of things there. So do you really mess with it? And again, context absolutely matters, right? If the offensive line is giving up a ton of pressures, but Jayden Daniels is just making it work anyway, okay, then maybe you still bring Jayden, then you bring Sam in even with an 8-3 record, right? Or 9-2 record. So again, context is going to matter. We're talking generalities here, right? But that's just kind of where my mind went with the conversation. Now, as far as who's going to step up in place of Sam, especially for like say week 1, like a prediction there. Honestly, I think the offensive line is going to be the talk of training camp, but I kind of think it's already figured out. I think Nick Allegretti is going to be your right guard. I think Brandon Coleman is going to be your left guard. Laramie Tunsil is your left tackle. Tyler Biadasz is your center. And Andrew Wiley / Josh Connerly Jr. are your right tackle. Similar to what we saw with Cordelius Lucas and Brandon Coleman last year. I think Andrew Wiley is going to start off as the first team right tackle. Josh Connerly is going to rotate in there. And then as Josh proves that he's ready to take the reins fully, that will just kind of eventually work itself out. Cosmi either comes in at right guard when he's healthy, and then Allegretti pushes to the bench or left guard, or that unit just stays the same, again, pending injuries. If Cosmi doesn't come back at all, then I think Nate Herbig, Trent Scott, and Andrew Wiley are your primary interior offensive line backups. And obviously, Andrew Wiley is going to be out there as right tackle as long as he needs to be. So that's just kind of how I see the offensive line working out. I don't want to try to like spoil the suspense, but unless things really kind of get different or Brandon like really struggles or something like that, that's kind of just how I see the offensive line working out this year. If the Commanders keep learning from other teams' mistakes, if they keep building around Jayden Daniels and they make the right call around Sam Cosmi, then I think the team's going to be in great shape. At the end of the day, that's really what's important. Terry's going to get his deal. Jayden's going to look like an improved quarterback, potentially challenged to be the next MVP in his second year, right? Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Kurt Warner, the last 3 quarterbacks to win NFL MVP in their second season in the NFL. Jayden could potentially take that step if these moves that the Commanders have done pan out and if health permits. And if they make the right call on Sam Cosmi, I think that this season is going to go very well. And I think you guys, Commanders fans, are going to be very, very happy. That's going to do it for today's mailbag episode. Next time on Locked On Commanders, who stood out behind the starters on the offensive line during OTAs and mandatory minicamp? Which division has the best wide receiving core? And why one surprise defender is already turning heads. In the meantime, if you've got questions or comments you want to add to the mailbag, you can do so by texting them to me at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become a Locked On Commanders insider. And not only are you going to be able to reach out to me, I'm going to reach out to you and give you all kinds of information, additional things in addition to the show that you can't get anywhere else. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting as teams like the Bengals and Commanders navigate major roster decisions and training camp draws near. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino are going to keep you informed on how every move impacts the entire league. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you're getting this podcast. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Commanders your first listen to the everydayers. I see you, I appreciate you, and I thank you. Until next time, stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk again soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.